Hello and welcome. I am so glad to have you here this week because I'm talking about a topic that is something that if we can master it, if you can really get your head around this, it can totally change your life. So, we're talking today about how to stop resisting life and to open up to the good that you deserve. So, what does that mean? And you probably think, well, I'm not resisting life. I'm totally open up to receiving the good I deserve. And you're probably not even aware of all the ways that you're resisting and how to stop. Because let's face it, you can't stop something that you're not aware that you're doing. So that brings me to what we always hear, that old saying, what you resist in life persists. And in Conversations with God, Neil Donald Walsh talks about, the concept of resist nothing. No matter what is going on in your life, no matter how bad things seem, no matter if it's the worst thing that you could possibly think or imagine that's going on. And let's face it, we've all had situations like that where we think that the ground is falling from under us and it's the absolutely worst thing that's ever going to happen. And somehow we get through it and we come out the other side, and we're not only have we learned from it, but we're a stronger person. We have lived through it. We've become stronger, more resilient, and we've realized that, okay, yeah, maybe this did come for a reason, or maybe you haven't got to that stage yet. Maybe you don't know why that came into your life, but you got through it, and there's always something good that comes from every situation. When we know that on the deepest level, when we know that every situation brings something good, then there's no reason to resist anything, because we know that something good is going to come out of every situation that we're in. So that's the first point. If we realize that something good is coming from this, then we can let go of all resistance, because we only need to resist something if we think it's going to be bad or we don't want it. And if everything that we're going through, everything that we're experiencing is bringing something good, that something is ultimately coming into our lives for our benefit, then we don't need to resist it, because if it's for our benefit, we don't need to push it away. So I'm going to talk you through 3 steps to help you with this process, and just to solidify a little bit how to do this and how to stop resisting. And I have to mention that it's not something that you learn today and then your whole life changes overnight. It can, but more often than not, it's something that you learn today, and then you'll practice it, and then you might forget about it, or something big will come up that you start resisting. And it's a process of constantly applying these teachings, getting used to living your life from this new way and letting go of all the old habits. And that's the hard part, because the habits that keep you stuck are the things that you'll revert to when there's a crisis or when something happens that you don't want. And what we want to do is create a new habit. And the way to do that is to be consistent in our application of these steps, so that it becomes a new habit. And over time, that's your new baseline. It's like a habit that you've created of non-resistance as opposed to resistance. So step number 1 is to recognize the ways in which you're resisting. So you may think that you are open to everything, that you're not resisting anything, and that you're stuck in your life for no reason, or good things don't come to you, you don't know why, and you might not even have an awareness that there is resistance there. So resistance comes in many forms. It comes in the form of thoughts, thinking about things that you don't want, worrying, anxiety, fear-based thoughts. All of those things are a form of resistance. So unless you are a Zen monk, I guarantee that you're going to have some form of those thoughts. And that's okay. It's not to say that you shouldn't, but just become aware of those. So the second thing is, so the first thing is thoughts. The second thing is through your spoken words, through your speech. So what you're saying. And if you find yourself complaining, if you find yourself saying something about somebody else that you don't like about them, or if you find yourself just talking about fear-based things, it might not need to be anything big. It might even be something really, really simple, like, oh, it's going to snow this week. Isn't that so terrible? I'm not going to be able to make it to my gym class, or something like that. So just becoming aware of the thoughts that you're thinking, the words that you're saying, and then finding your actions, so the things that you're doing. So you can be resisting through your actions, through the things that you're actually doing in your life without even realize it. And if you have ever been driving in your car and beeped at somebody else, that's some form of resistance, where it might be the person in front of you hasn't realized that there's a green light and you're sitting behind them. And instead of relaxing and knowing that the flow of traffic will continue probably in the next 30 seconds, if you've beeped at the person, now we've all done it, I've done it, it's still a form of resistance, because you're resisting what they're doing, you're resisting the outside world. And we do it so many ways. I mean, I couldn't even begin to list all the ways in which we do it. That's just a very simple example. If you ever find yourself trying to open a zip and the zip keeps getting stuck and you're just getting so frustrated with it, you're just like totally resisting that. Rather than relaxing into it, you're resisting it. So, and you know, the second point is that it's okay. It's okay to be in that state. It's okay to allow those emotions to come up. It's okay to have that level of resistance, because you know that's probably what you've been taught, that's probably all you know, and up till now you probably haven't realized the level to which you're resisting. So the second point is to observe yourself without judgment, and to realize that even though you're resisting these things, that there is another way. So when you observe yourself without judgment, it might be that you are in your car and you're beeping at the person, and then you realize afterwards, okay, like maybe I could have just waited a few more seconds, taken a deep breath in and out, and just release that resistance of that person who hasn't driven off the second the lights have changed. And when you do that, you open up a space for greater compassion, not just for the other person, but for yourself. And what will happen is, as you begin to observe all the ways in which you're resisting, your thoughts, your words, your actions, you'll begin to find a little bit of space developing. At first, you'll probably be observing what you've done after the event. And then you'll find you're observing yourself resisting as you're doing it. And then the third stage is when you're about to resist something, but you stop yourself, or you find that you're able to refocus. Because let's face it, if you stop yourself resisting, or if you stop yourself doing an action, that's actually a form of resistance. So the trick is to observe and to have that little bit of space, that pause between observing something happening in your external world or observing your thoughts and the reaction to it. So just having a little bit of space between what you normally would do is react straight away, and just allowing a little bit of space to develop. It could be a microsecond, it could be a few seconds, it could be that you use a mindfulness practice of counting to 10, but that pause will allow you to release resistance. And then the third stage is choose to refocus, and then to refocus, and then to refocus again. So what does that mean? So when you are, say, thinking thoughts of worry about a situation that may or may not happen in the future, when you observe yourself worrying, it's like, if you can imagine, there's like situation A on this side, which is all the worst things that can happen, which you're worrying about. And then situation B is on this side. And so let's say this is the best case scenario. This is like everything turning out in everybody's favor for the highest good of all concerned. And when you're focused, when you're worrying about situation A, it's like, if you can imagine, like literally like a laser coming from your third eye, and it's beaming straight out at that situation, all the things that you don't want, the negative stuff, all of the worst case scenario stuff, and you're laser focused on that. So when you're laser focused on one thing, what you focus on increases. So of course, all the bad stuff, all the things that you don't want, are going to expand when you focus on them. Okay, so refocusing simply means shifting from pointing that laser at situation A to turning and pointing the laser at situation B, which is all the stuff that you want. So say you're in a relationship and you're worried about your partner, I don't know, finding out that you've done something. Let's see, you've hidden something from them and you've kept it a big secret, and it's something that you're not proud of, and you are like focused on all the negative things that could happen if your partner finds out about it. Okay, so let's say you're stuck in that worry and you're stuck in that situation of all the bad things. Refocusing means shifting to the best case scenario, which is probably being honest with your partner, being open, being loving, but also seeing them responding in a receptive, open, loving way, and having clear communication between the two of you, having an open, honest relationship, and being totally free to be yourself without having to hide things, without having to keep secrets, and to be totally in trust that that is the best thing for everybody and that the relationship will be stronger because of it. So that's the best case scenario. So it's really just getting out of all the heaviness of what will happen if he finds out, what will happen if this happens, what happened, and just shifting, saying, well, what could happen is we could have an open, honest relationship. We could have clear, communication between us. We could have a really secure foundation for our relationship, and just refocus on what that means and how that feels and what you could get from that, and just see how that feels for you. Because most likely when you're in all the heavy stuff, you're going to feel stressed, you're going to feel anxious, you're going to feel constricted. And when you start focusing on this side, the positive best case scenario, you're going to feel more expansive, you're going to feel more loving, you're going to feel just lighter and freer. So recognizing where you're pointing that laser and switching and pointing that laser towards what you do want, refocusing. And refocusing isn't a form of resistance. It's not that you're choosing to resist. You're observing what's happening. You're acknowledging what's happening. You're observing yourself without any judgment, and then you're making a choice. So making a choice is different to resistance. Resistance is saying that this isn't happening and I'm not keeping a secret and there's nothing to worry about. The other side is observing that you are doing all of this, you are worrying about it, and you are creating stress for yourself and your loved ones through your energy, through your actions, through your thoughts. And then choosing, okay, well, what do I want? Do I want to keep focusing on this, or am I going to point the laser in the other direction and focus on what I really do want? And when I say choose to refocus and to refocus and to refocus, because what will happen is initially, it's like the laser, when it's pointed this direction, it's like it's locked on. So it's going to be really hard to start shifting it over to the best case scenario, because it's such a big shift to make. And you may be able to shift it a little bit, but you'll probably then find it naturally goes back to its baseline of fearful, negative thinking. And that's okay, because what will happen is you'll shift in increments. So instead of going from this case scenario and making a huge leap over to this, it is possible, but you're more likely to shift in little increments. So you'll go from point A over to point B, which will initially begin to be here. And that point B is probably along the lines of, okay, yeah, well, I recognize what I'm doing. I recognize this is harmful for me and people in my life, but I'm willing to accept that that's where I am at now, but I'm also willing to change. And then you make another little shift and you think, well, I could change in certain ways. I could start thinking a little bit better. I could start acting in more trusting ways. I could start being more open. And you're just going to make those little jumps over to point B, where you want to be, the best case scenario. And it's a really lovely process, because you're just being really gentle with yourself. You're not saying, oh, I shouldn't be thinking that. I can't believe I was thinking that. I can't believe I did that. You're recognizing, okay, well, that's where I'm at now, and that's okay. And then you're choosing just to go little jumps over to the best case scenario, and just to even be open to recognizing what that might be like. And if you're really entrenched in the worst case scenario, it may be that you don't even know what the best case scenario is, because you've no perception of what that could be. So it may be that all you can do for the moment is jump to the second worst case scenario, and then jump to the next worst case scenario until you're kind of lifting each time up a level until you get to where you want to be. And as you move through the stages, what will happen is the best case scenario will start opening up for you. You'll start tuning into what it is that best case scenario is. You'll start tuning into what you do want as opposed to what you don't want. And you'll start to align with that energy. And all that time, the laser beam will be shifting and shifting and shifting until it's aligned with this point. And once you're over here, then it's very unlikely that it'll shift all the way back over here. You may have days that it might shift very slightly in this direction, but you'll recognize when that happens, and then you'll shift and refocus on this side on what you do want. So it's a constant practice of refocusing, and recognizing where you're at, and then just refocusing on what you do want. And it takes a lot of awareness. It takes a lot of mindfulness, being mindful of your thoughts, of what you're saying, of what you're doing. And it can be that you need help with it. It can be that you need to nurture that side of you that maybe you haven't nurtured that before, and you don't really know how to nurture it. You don't maybe have the tools or the processes or things that can help you along the way. And that's okay. You can learn some of those tools. You can learn mindfulness techniques. You can learn meditation. You can learn to be more present in the moment. And there's so many things that you can do to learn to shift from the negative scenario to the positive scenario, and just do it in a way that is nurturing and not judgmental, that you're observing yourself without any judgment, and just choosing what you do want, and choosing again and again and again to focus on what you do want. And it really is that simple, and it really is that hard as well, because you have to have a huge level of awareness. And what you'll find is that you'll think that you have a good level of awareness, but you won't realize how many thoughts that you're actually missing, because we have on average about 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day. So most of those thoughts go under the radar. You're not even going to realize that you're having those thoughts, and it'll be only a very small percentage of those that you'll begin to recognize. And that's okay as well, because it's a starting point. And as you develop more and more awareness, you'll begin to see more and more of your thought processes and how you want to shift from resisting life, resisting where you're at, resisting how things are, to refocusing on choosing something different, to choose what you do want rather than resisting what you don't want. Okay? So I hope that makes sense to you. And I would love to hear if you have any questions. If this has helped you in any way, please let me know. I love hearing from you. And if you're on Instagram, I'm over on Instagram, Sandra Ray /Angelic Bodies. And it would be a pleasure to have you join me over there as well. So I will see you next time, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.